Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're mapping out one of the most fascinating intersections of human psychology and global technology. We're breaking down how the intensely strict personal philosophy of one founder, Pavel Durov, got written directly into the code of a massive, globally defined tech platform, Telegram. We're going to see exactly how a fiercely disciplined mind built a literally uncompromising machine. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Worst case, they can kill you. There's no point living your life in fear. Now, that isn't some line from a cheesy action movie. That is the literal, everyday operating philosophy of Telegram's CEO. To really understand an app that's used by over 1 billion people, you've got to understand this extreme mindset first. Durov basically operates under the assumption that fear is the ultimate enemy of freedom. If you just strip away the fear of the absolute worst-case scenario, your own mortality, you entirely strip away the leverage that powerful people, megacorporations, or even governments can hold over you. And that leads us to the really high-stakes question at the very core of this explainer. I mean, how does a stoic philosophy build a platform that actually defies global governments? It's one thing to have a tough personal philosophy, right? It's a whole other beast to scale that to 1 billion users. How does a single-person stoicism physically translate into a global communications network that successfully resists intelligence agencies and state censorship? And why should we care? Well, because understanding this shows us exactly how technology can either be used as a tool for control or engineered as an architecture for absolute independence. Section 1, the philosophy of freedom. So, to understand that architecture, we really have to start with the man himself. Look at his aesthetic lifestyle. It is, frankly, completely ruthless. We're talking no alcohol, no pills, no illegal drugs for over 20 years. He pairs that with an intense daily regimen of 300 push-ups and squats, freezing ice baths, and extreme banyo routines. Oh, and he doesn't even look at a smartphone in the morning. Why? Because he views every single one of these things as vectors for external control. He believes that if you open your phone first thing in the morning, you're letting an algorithm dictate what you care about for the rest of the day. If you drink alcohol, you're literally paralyzing your brain cells just for a fleeting moment of social acceptance. He strips away all chemical and digital distractions to actively, fiercely protect his mind from societal manipulation. And this brilliantly illustrates a much deeper framework for how he makes decisions. He's contrasting short-term pleasure, which just mutes pain, against long-term flourishing, which means facing your root fears. Durov views things like alcohol or even headache pills as spiritual or biological painkillers. They mute the symptoms, sure, but they leave the root problem completely intact. Instead of popping a pill for headache, he stops and asks, am I stressed? Am I sleeping poorly? Instead of grabbing a drink to feel confident at a party, he forces himself to confront that fear of rejection head-on. It's all about trading that short-term, fleeting pleasure for actual long-term independence. Which brings us to Section 2, Telegram's lean engineering. Now, what's really interesting here is how this mindset builds software. We're moving from the man to the machine. 40, just 40. That is the entire size of Telegram's core engineering team. 40 people managing a platform for over 1 billion active users, running on tens of thousands of servers scattered all across the globe. By tech industry standards, that ratio of engineers to users is absolutely wild. It almost sounds made up. So how is that even possible? Well, it comes down to 3 ruthless strategies. First up, extreme server automation. A tiny team is basically physically forced to automate everything because they simply don't have the manpower to do it manually. Second, an absolute zero-tolerance policy for B players. Engineers who lag behind or, try to shift responsibility, fired, because they actively demotivate the geniuses on the team. And third, extreme code optimization. Durov's math prodigy brother, Nikolai, literally rewrote major data engines in low-level C and C++ just to ensure the platform processes data with absolute blistering efficiency. And listen, this intense focus on speed, it's not just some technical flex, it is deeply philosophical. Durov calculates that if a message takes just 50 extra milliseconds to load, and you multiply that tiny delay across 1 billion users opening the app dozens of times a day, you are literally wasting centuries of collective human time. Let that sink in. In Durov's eyes, optimizing code to be as fast as physically possible is a direct, tangible form of respect for human freedom and human life. Section 3, the architecture of privacy. Now, this incredibly lean, highly optimized machine was built with a very specific defensive purpose in mind. To protect users from sprawling global governments, Telegram relies on a distributed encrypted cloud. Now, this is a crucial technical concept, so stick with me.
They don't just encrypt your data. They split the decryption keys into separate pieces and then physically store those pieces in entirely different countries that have totally conflicting legal jurisdictions. This setup physically and legally prevents any single intelligence agency or government from just walking into a server farm with a warrant and seizing user data. It's like a giant puzzle where the pieces are scattered across the entire planet. Let's move on and see how this builds a completely different kind of corporate structure. Because this defensive architecture extends directly to how they view human resources. To Telegram, human employees are vulnerable attack vectors. Think about it. If you have thousands of human employees managing servers, a government can bribe, threaten, or blackmail just one of them to get backdoor access, right? But by keeping the team tiny and relying on algorithmic automation to manage that distributed network, Telegram essentially removes human corruption from the equation altogether. No employee, actually not even Durov himself, has the technical ability to access your private messages. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful absolute zero. Zero is the exact number of private messages Telegram has ever shared with global governments, police forces, or intelligence agencies in its entire history. None. They engineered a system where yielding to government pressure on private data isn't just against their company rules, it's mathematically and technically impossible. Section 4. Clashing with governments. Of course, when an immovable, uncompromising machine operates in a world ruled by expanding state bureaucracies, well, friction is absolutely inevitable. Over just a few months, we see a rapidly escalating geopolitical timeline. In August, Durov was suddenly arrested in Paris. But the pressure definitely didn't stop there. By September, while he was still detained in France, intermediaries actually asked Telegram to block political channels ahead of elections in Moldova. Then, by October, he was brought into meetings with intelligence officials who explicitly asked him to silence conservative voices related to the Romanian elections. We're looking at a systematic, multi-nation attempt to use his detention as pure leverage for political censorship.
So, the crucial point is how Telegram navigates all this friction, and they do it by holding a strictly neutral, apolitical boundary. They flat out refuse the French intelligence requests to censor peaceful political voices in Romania, just like they previously refused requests to censor far-left protest groups in France or BLM activists in the US. If it is peaceful free speech, Telegram protects it, regardless of whether it's left-wing or right-wing. At the exact same time, though, they aggressively use AI to hunt down and ban millions of actually illegal posts. Things like CSAM and terrorist propaganda every single day.
Section 5. The arrest in France. This absolute refusal to compromise brings us to the peak of our narrative. It's a completely unprecedented event in the tech world, the arrest of a CEO for the actions of the users on his platform. Durov describes his time in French custody as entirely Kafkaesque. I mean, he was ambushed by a dozen armed police right at the airport. He spent 4 days in a windowless cell, sleeping on a bare concrete bed, and he was charged with over a dozen serious crimes solely based on the illegal things other people typed into his app. But honestly, the most absurd part? The interrogating officials demonstrated a staggering lack of understanding of how machine learning, encryption, or even just basic technology actually works. It was a massive head-on collision between automated global tech and slow, traditional judicial bureaucracy. But remember that stoic philosophy we started with? Well, this was its ultimate test. Facing maximum state pressure, the real threat of 20 years in prison, and the potential loss of his life's work. Durov's response was absolute defiance. He stated, "I would rather starve myself to death and die there than do something stupid." He'd rather starve in a concrete cell than compromise his principles or hand over backdoor access to user data. That early philosophy we talked about, it wasn't just empty talk. It held up perfectly under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. Bureaucracies naturally seek more power, right? And they almost always justify it through the lens of safety and security. But when governments demand absolute control for safety, do we lose the very freedom the system was built to protect? It is an incredibly delicate, high-stakes balance between chaos and order. And honestly, it's a balance that is going to define the future of our digital world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions, and I'll see you next time.